Alright, hello everyone, and welcome back to Daily Update, my 1000 day challenge. This is day 210. So let's get things started. Alright, so what you've noticed over here is a very significant drop in terms of my equity. So that is somewhat expected, especially when there was a still continuation towards the further downside. So that triggered both my losses in my main trading account, and some of which got actually liquidated unnecessarily. That's actually because I was using isolated account margin. So when I took losses for one of them, it seems that the margin that was given for the remaining position was actually a lot less than I expected. So this is something that I think happened to me, I think two, or maybe this is the third time. So this is something I need to be very cautious about, and I'll potentially increase my margin in terms of isolated margin wise to ensure that I always have sufficient margin to hit my stop loss before taking a loss, because I always have a stop loss and I shouldn't be relying on the isolated margin kind of to play with in that sense. As for the price action I took over, so that actually been reflected over on the experimental trade setup. So I place it over there is because I already have sufficient position in terms of my main trading account setup. I already entered 2R position, which is why I can see a much significant drop. It's almost like 2% for each trade, so that's around 6% in terms of my R wise. So yep, that's something to bear in mind. So I've wrote over here, loss taken for the breakout trade. Later I'll talk more about it, but in terms of the market structure, you can see that overall both the financial market and traditional financial market and also the cryptocurrency looks to be bearish in terms of short-term wise. But overall, like what I mentioned, things definitely is bullish in the long-term sense, especially with inflation taken into consideration and stuff like that. So yeah, to me, it's actually a very good news, even though you might be fearful and stuff like that. But in my opinion, this is potentially one of a good times to actually consider adding in terms of long-term position. For trading wise, I'll definitely wait for confirmation. But for investment wise, I'll talk through as to which are the points that I'll be looking at to add. So this is a trade setup that I've lost. So do bear this in mind, and I'll delete this. All right, so potentially we could have a bounce up above here. But before I talk about that, let's go right from the start at the S&P 500. You'll notice that even though we bounced right above here, actually a very sharp drop downwards again. So now that we have fallen the second time, potentially we could consolidate right above this support now and break further downside, in which case I've drawn this new horizontal daily support because it was previously at a resistance, somewhat like a support before, and then definitely as a support before it bounced upwards. So we could retest over here before continuation or a consolidation signal as well, pattern as well. Alternatively, if it does break a much stronger down, then there will definitely be a great place for me to add in terms of long-term position wise. Yeah, because right over here is where we consolidated one time, two times, and three times before we break above. So I will see this as very strong support, especially also with the 150 simple moving average on the daily chart as well. And likewise for Nasdaq, actually is a little bit more bearish, but over here we also similarly found some support over here. So technically before any lower, we could see somewhere along here. So I'll just bring this thing up over here. So potentially you could get over here as well, near the 150 simple day moving average, or if it goes even lower, then there'll be somewhere near here. So these are the three staggered buy that I'll be looking to add in if it does fall over here in terms of the Nasdaq stock. Then next up, we have for ASHR. So it seems like we are falling below the support and we have closed below the 50 simple moving average. So technically, we could be seeing further downside, especially with the news in terms of how the Hong Kong has increased in terms of the taxes. I'm not too familiar with that, but I did do a brief read on that. So basically, that is some sort of bad news if they just increase the taxes. Otherwise, in terms of support-wise, I'll definitely be considering it if it falls over here again, which is around 37 to 30, yeah, I would say $38 to $40 or $38 to $39 range, so the $1 range over here. So that's something to bear in mind. And finally, for K, where it sells very large drop, so I'm still waiting to fall over here. Or if it was potentially much stronger drop, then potentially we could still see it over here once again. Then that'll be great because remember I added over here. If it does come over here as well, I'll definitely be adding once again. Here wise, I would not consider adding, but if you're new to it, then I'll definitely add say maybe 10-20% of my intended position size. But yeah, that's about it. All right, and finally for Bitcoin itself, so like what I mentioned, Bitcoin, even though people have been saying it's rather bearish and it's like significantly bearish for a short time, but if you look in terms of percentage-wise, actually not as bad as even over the retracement we had over here. Remember from the top to bottom, we had almost a 31% drop in terms of the full length from the high to the low. Whereas over here, even with images from the high to the low, we're only experiencing a 24% drop. So even if we experience a 30% drop, we are going to be somewhat seeing in this 40K range, which will be great. And for me to turn really bearish wise, you will really have to break the 40 or 50% mark. So that will be really, really bearish. So technically anywhere the 30K region will be an absolutely great place for me to get. But if it does come near this 50 simple moving average, I'll definitely be, like what I mentioned, overstretching myself a little bit to add in. But otherwise, I'm staying out of the market in terms of long-term position. But of course, if it spends more time over here, by the time next month, I get another more revenue or more income coming in, I'll definitely be looking to add at this level as well. Yeah, so the overall long-term, the prospect of Bitcoin, in my humble opinion, still remains bullish, and I'm definitely be willing to add in terms of the return that I potentially see it coming. All right, so on the 4-hour chart, like I mentioned, you could potentially enter over here because there's somewhat like a bullish divergence. And then with this confirmation candlestick in terms of the green wise. So I did enter in terms of my main trading account setup. But bear in mind that that's not based on price action. Price action wise, I want a confirmation signal, which means I want some sort of retracement and pullback for higher high. Then I'll enter with a long setup over here like this. So I'm not sure if it will happen or not, or if we just straight through up, then potentially I'll miss it in that sense. So if we have some sort of retracement and then pull back right above and break, then there's where I'll consider to enter. So there's a potential setup, but if it does happen, you would take definitely more than today itself to happen to form that sort of a zigzag pattern of a higher low and higher high kind of pattern before I enter a long setup based on price action wise. So yep, that's more or less about it. We're definitely still looking bullish, especially if we found this support over here before it bounce up. And potentially we could find support over here before we go up as well. So yep, let's see how price action takes us. And otherwise, have a great weekend, everyone. And I'll see you guys tomorrow. Take care. Bye-bye.